Yeah. Robert?
Last week you said that our souls are a higher creation than the universe, but currently they need the universe to exist. That sort of implies something, doesn't it?
It sort of does. It's an interesting question, isn't it? Like, obviously God made the soul, so it's a creation. Then God made the soul to be able to play in the universe, right? So there's, you can play in the universe. But as to receiving more and more of God's nature, what does that do to the soul? And does it later give the soul the ability to exit the universe, if you would like, or create its own universe? These are questions that are not understood or known at this point. It makes sense. So it's difficult to say what God's intent for the future is without somebody firstly going through that experience of it. And my experience was taking me 2,000 years to learn these things. I don't know. And that's a very short period of time when you consider if the human tried to learn these things without God. A modern man didn't know any of these things for 200,000 years. So you can see it's quite a short period of time, really. But we don't know what we don't know. You only know what you think you know. So it's difficult because it's like with every experience, because this is an immersive experience, you go through the immersion yourself. And it's the same in the spirit world. Many of you, all of you here pretty much, aside from a couple, are in your first incarnation on earth, right? So you've never experienced the spirit world even. So you're not going to know that it exists for certain until you get there. And that'll happen as soon as you die. You'll then know it exists, right? So once you know it exists, it then opens like areas of investigation for you, doesn't it? Like that you didn't know were there before. And it's very much the same when you go through the union of the soul process, the joining of the two halves of the soul. It's very much the same process. The two halves join, and then there's a whole heap of things you didn't know about before that now you realise must be there, and now you can investigate all that. So it's very interesting the way God's planned the universe so that you're always able to learn more. You're always able to discover more. And of course, the speed at which you learn and discover will be very much dependent upon how much of God's infinite nature you receive. So in terms of knowing whether, what God's intention is for the human in terms of the universe and whether we're always going to live in this universe or not, given the fact that God's love exists before the universe was even created, and we're receiving some of that love into your soul, so now from a mathematical point of view, you have some substance inside of you when you receive that love. Of course, you've got to go through a process to receive it, but once you do receive it, and you receive some of that love, you realise that, I'm receiving something now that the universe that doesn't belong to the universe, it belongs to God. So what does that now mean for my potential for the future? There's a lot of spirits in the celestial heavens discussing that question. Fascinating things. The more you grow and the more you experience, the more fascinated you become by how much there is to grow and experience. How much more growth there is and how much more experience you need. It's sort of like a never-ending process of growth and wonder and experience and under those circumstances. So it's a very good thing that as humans we start to wonder, and particularly in your incarnation, when you've just come here, you're in first incarnation, you could say, or your only one really. Your only incarnation is this one. This is the only time you're going to be on the earth. After you leave here, you won't come back, and you won't probably want to either, because it's far too interesting there. And there's far too many things to investigate and wonder about and experience that are way beyond what you can currently imagine here. Why would you come back? Every spirit who's ever considered coming back had a lot of initial misgivings, including myself, about coming back. Right? Yeah, so there's no automatic reincarnation or anything like that. There's no way you can come back unless you understand the law. So again, the law, the mass, defines everything that happens. It defines what happens when you came here first, defines what happens when you die, defines what happens after you die. There's a structure, and of course, you having free will are able to now exercise that will, but only within the limits of the structure. Or you could say only within the limits of the mass. Or you could say only within the limits of the law. It's another way of saying it. That's the limit you're going to be under. And once you understand the law, now you become more unlimited. And that applies in the physical sense. It also applies on an emotional sense. And it also applies in reality to your actual experience. The more you grow, the more you're able to grow. The more you change, the more you're able to change. The more you understand, the more you're able to understand. So there's this constant design in that universe that everything is changing, growing, and causing the human to want to know more. So this whole concept that a lot of people have that when you die, you know everything, it's a physical impossibility to know everything when you die. You're not going to know everything for hundreds of millions of years to come. You might know a lot in comparison with human standard, but you still won't know everything. It's a physical impossibility for you to know everything. Because to know everything, you'd have to be God. You'd have to be infinite. Yeah.